Sarah Martinez stared at the crumpled letter in her hands, her fingers trembling as she read the words for the 100th time. The government seal at the top made it official, but the message inside felt like a knife twisting in her chest. Her father, Colonel James Martinez, was missing in action during a classified mission overseas. The letter was 3 months old, and there had been no update since. At 24, Sarah had always lived in her father's shadow. James Martinez was a legend in military circles, known as Ghost Shot, for his incredible precision with a sniper rifle. He could hit targets from distances that seemed impossible, and his skills had saved countless lives during his 30-year career. Sarah remembered the stories he would tell her as a child, sitting on his lap while he cleaned his rifle with careful, practiced movements. "Patience, little one," he would say, his weathered hands steady as rocks. A good sniper doesn't just aim with their eyes. They aim with their heart, their mind, their soul. Every shot tells a story, and you better make sure it's the right one. Sarah had tried to follow in his footsteps, joining the military reserves and training at the shooting range every weekend. But she never felt like she measured up. Her shots were good, even excellent by most standards, but they weren't legendary. They weren't ghost shot quality. Her father had always been encouraging, never pushing her to be something she wasn't, but Sarah felt the weight of expectation anyway. Now, sitting in her small apartment in Denver, she felt more lost than ever. The military had given her compassionate leave from her job as a communications specialist. But what was she supposed to do with it? Her mother had died when Sarah was 12, and her father was all the family she had left. The thought of him being gone forever made her chest tight with panic. The phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but something made her answer anyway. Sarah Martinez? The voice was rough, older, with a slight accent she couldn't place. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Victor Petrov. I served with your father in Bosnia back in '98. I heard about his situation." Sarah sat up straighter. Her father rarely talked about his missions, but she knew Bosnia had been significant. "What do you know about my father?" "More than the government is telling you, I'm afraid." Victor's voice was grim. "James isn't just missing, Sarah. He's being held by a group called the Shadow Collective. They're running operations out of an old Soviet base in the mountains of Eastern Europe. Very dangerous people." Sarah's heart pounded. "How do you know this?" "Because they tried to recruit me 2 years ago. When I refused, they made my life very difficult. But I have contacts, people who owe me favors. Your father is alive, but not for long. The collective has a habit of disposing of prisoners once they've extracted what they need. I have to tell the military, they have to send a rescue team." "No." Victor's voice was sharp. "The base is in disputed territory. Officially, no government can touch it without starting an international incident. Any rescue mission would be denied, covered up. Your father would die and no one would ever know." Sarah felt tears burning her eyes. "Then what am I supposed to do?" "I'm nobody special. I'm just a communications specialist who shoots targets on weekends." "You're James Martinez's daughter," Victor said softly. "That means you have his blood, his instincts. And if the stories he told me are true, he trained you better than you know. I'm not a soldier. I'm not like him. Maybe not yet. But Sarah, your father taught me something once. He said the best snipers aren't born, they're forged by necessity. And right now you have more necessity than anyone I know." Sarah closed her eyes, trying to process what Victor was telling her. "Even if I wanted to help, I don't know where to start. I don't have military resources, special equipment, or a team." "You have something better," Victor replied. "You have motivation that no soldier can match. And you have me. I know people who can help. People who exist in the shadows between governments. But Sarah, this isn't a game. If you go down this path, you might not come back. And you'll definitely never be the same person you are right now." Sarah looked around her apartment, at the normal life she'd built for herself. Her job, her routine, her safe existence. Then she looked at the letter again, at the official words that meant her father might die alone in some foreign prison. "What would I need to do? First, you need to disappear. Sarah Martinez, the communications specialist, needs to vanish for a while. Then you need to become someone else, someone who can do what needs to be done. Your father once told me that every shot tells a story. It's time for you to start writing yours." Sarah took a shaky breath. "When do we start?" "Pack light. Bring nothing that can identify you. Meet me tomorrow night at the old warehouse on 5th Street, the one by the railroad tracks. Come alone, and Sarah—" Victor paused. "Bring your father's rifle, the one he kept at home. You're going to need it." After Victor hung up, Sarah sat in the silence of her apartment. She walked to her father's bedroom, the one she'd kept exactly as he left it. In the closet behind his uniforms was a locked case. She'd never opened it, respecting his privacy, but she knew what was inside. His personal rifle, the one he'd used before his military-issued weapons, the one he'd learned on as a young man. Sarah found the key where he'd always kept it, taped under his dresser drawer. Inside the case was a beautiful rifle, older than his military weapons but maintained with the same careful precision. There was also a note written in her father's careful handwriting. "Sarah, if you're reading this, then I'm probably in trouble, and you're thinking of doing something dangerous. Remember what I taught you about patience, about aiming with more than just your eyes. But most importantly, remember that being a hero isn't about being fearless. It's about being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. Trust yourself, trust your training, and know that I'm proud of you no matter what happens. Love always, Dad." Sarah held the note against her chest and made her decision. Tomorrow night her old life would end and something new would begin. She didn't know if she was strong enough to save her father, but she was going to find out. The legend of Ghost Shot had taught her well, even if she didn't realize it yet. The warehouse smelled of rust and abandoned dreams. Sarah arrived exactly at midnight, her father's rifle case slung across her shoulder and a backpack containing everything she couldn't bear to leave behind. Victor emerged from the shadows like a ghost, and she was surprised by his appearance. She'd expected someone younger, more military-looking. Instead, she saw a man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen too much. "You came," he said simply. "Did you think I wouldn't?" Victor smiled sadly. "Hope and expectation are different things. Your father would be proud." He gestured toward a door at the back of the warehouse. "Come, there are people you need to meet." Inside, Sarah found herself in what looked like a miniature command center. 3 people sat around a table covered with maps, photographs, and electronic equipment. Victor made introductions with military efficiency. Elena Volkov, our intelligence specialist. She knows more about the Shadow Collective than anyone alive. A woman in her 40s with short blonde hair nodded curtly. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. Marcus Chen, communications and technology expert. If it has circuits, he can make it do whatever we need. A younger man, maybe 30, looked up from a laptop and gave Sarah a nervous smile. And Dmitry Kozlov, our logistics coordinator. He can get anything, anywhere, without questions. The third man was enormous, with hands like sledgehammers and a surprisingly gentle voice. "And you're the sniper," Elena said, studying Sarah with professional interest. "Victor tells us you're untrained but have potential." "I've been shooting since I was 8, Sarah replied defensively. "Shooting targets," Elena corrected. "Very different from shooting people who are shooting back." Victor held up a hand before Sarah could respond. "Elena, show her what we know about the base." Elena spread out a collection of satellite photos and hand-drawn diagrams. The Shadow Collective has converted an old Soviet listening post in the Carpathian Mountains. It's isolated, defensible, and technically in territory that 3 different countries claim, but none control. Sarah studied the images. The base was built into a mountainside, with most of the structure underground. "How many people?" "Approximately 40 operatives plus support staff. But here's the problem." Elena pointed to different areas of the base. Multiple entry points, all heavily guarded. Electronic surveillance everywhere, and they rotate prisoner locations every 6 hours. "So we can't just sneak in and sneak out," Sarah said. "No. Any rescue operation would need to be fast, loud, and extremely precise, which is where you come in." Elena looked at Sarah seriously. "There's a ridge approximately 800 meters from the main entrance. Perfect sniper position, but it would require shots that most people couldn't make." 800 meters isn't impossible," Sarah said, though her stomach clenched. The longest shot she'd ever made was 600 meters, and that was at a stationary target on a perfect day. "It's not just the distance," Marcus spoke up, pulling up weather data on his laptop. "The base is at high altitude with unpredictable wind patterns, temperature variations, and you'd be shooting at targets that know you're there and are actively trying to kill you." Sarah felt doubt creeping in. "Maybe we should find another way." "There is no other way," Dmitry said quietly. "I've spent 2 weeks analyzing this. The only scenario with acceptable success probability requires a sniper eliminating key guards, while a small team extracts the prisoner. Without that overwatch, the team dies." Victor sat down beside Sarah. Your father once told me about a shot he made in Afghanistan, 1,200 meters in a sandstorm to save a pinned-down patrol. When I asked him how he did it, he said something I never forgot. What? He said the rifle doesn't make the shot. The bullet doesn't make the shot. The sniper makes the shot. And the sniper is made of everything they've ever learned, everyone they've ever loved, and every reason they have to succeed. Sarah looked around the table at these strangers who were willing to risk everything for her father. What do I need to learn? For the next 3 weeks, Sarah's life became a blur of intensive training. Elena taught her urban warfare tactics, how to move silently, how to read terrain and weather conditions. Marcus showed her advanced communication systems and how to coordinate with a team under combat conditions. Dmitri trained her in weapons maintenance, emergency medical procedures, and survival skills. But it was Victor who taught her to really shoot. Every morning at dawn, they would drive to an abandoned quarry outside the city. Victor had set up targets at varying distances in different lighting conditions with obstacles and distractions. He pushed Sarah harder than she'd ever been pushed. Your father had a gift, he told her on the 3rd day, after she'd missed a particularly challenging shot. But more than that, he had discipline. He understood that every variable matters. Wind speed, humidity, target movement, your heartbeat, your breathing, even your thoughts. Sarah wiped sweat from her eyes. I'm trying. Trying is not enough. You must become the shot. Feel the bullet's path before you fire. Visualize it hitting the target. Victor demonstrated, taking aim at a target 700 meters away. His breathing slowed. His body became perfectly still, and when he fired, the target exploded in a shower of debris. Now you. By the 2nd week, Sarah was hitting targets at distances that would have seemed impossible a month earlier. But Victor wasn't satisfied. Accuracy is only half the equation, he said. Speed is the other half. In combat, you won't have minutes to line up your shot. You'll have seconds. He started calling out targets rapidly, forcing Sarah to acquire aim and fire in fluid motions. Target left 300 meters. Target right 500 meters. Moving target 400 meters. Sarah's muscles ached. Her hands were raw from the rifle's recoil and her eyes burned from staring through the scope. But she was getting better. More importantly, she was starting to understand what her father had tried to teach her years ago. It's not just about hitting the target, she said to Victor during a break on the 15th day. What do you mean? Every shot tells a story. The story of why you're taking it, who you're protecting, what happens if you miss. Sarah looked through her scope at a distant target. I used to think it was about being perfect. But it's not. It's about being necessary. Victor smiled for the first time since she'd met him. Now you're ready to learn the final lesson, which is how to kill someone who's trying to kill you. That afternoon, Victor set up scenarios with pop-up targets that appeared without warning. Sometimes behind cover, sometimes while Sarah was moving, sometimes while artificial gunfire played through speakers to simulate combat conditions. In the base, you won't just be shooting at targets, Victor explained. You'll be shooting at people. People with families, with fears, with their own reasons for fighting. You need to decide now if you can live with that. Sarah thought about her father alone in a prison cell, probably wondering if anyone would come for him. I can live with it if it brings him home. Good, because tomorrow we leave for Europe. The real mission begins. That night, Sarah called her supervisor at work and officially requested extended leave for a family emergency. She closed her bank accounts, forwarded her mail to a post office box, and wrote letters to the few friends she had, explaining that she might be unreachable for a while. Then she sat in her empty apartment with her father's rifle across her knees and tried to imagine what he would say if he could. See her now. I hope I make you proud, Dad, she whispered to the silence. I hope I'm strong enough to bring you home. The cargo plane rattled through turbulence somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, and Sarah gripped her seat to keep from being thrown around. Victor had arranged transport through contacts he refused to name, and Sarah had learned not to ask too many questions about the details. The less she knew about their methods, the better for everyone involved. Elena sat across from her, reviewing intelligence reports by the dim cabin light. The situation has changed, she said without looking up. Our sources inside the region report increased activity at the base. The Shadow Collective is preparing to move operations. Sarah's stomach dropped. Move where? Unknown. But if they relocate, we lose our chance. The base in the mountains is isolated, defensible but also predictable. If they move to an urban environment or a more secure facility, Extraction becomes nearly impossible. Marcus looked up from his equipment checks. How long do we have? Best estimate is 72 hours from when we land. Maybe less, Victor frowned. That's not enough time for proper reconnaissance. We'll be going in with incomplete information. It's the hand we're dealt, Elena replied. Either we move now or James Martinez disappears forever. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. These people were risking everything based on her abilities. Abilities she wasn't even sure she possessed. What if I'm not ready? What if I can't make the shots when it matters? Dmitri, who had been silent for most of the flight, spoke up. Your father once told me something during a mission in Chechnya. We were pinned down, outnumbered, certain we were going to die. I asked him if he was afraid. What did he say? He said fear was like cold weather. You can't make it go away, but you can learn to work in it. The afraid soldier who completes the mission is more valuable than the fearless soldier who gets everyone killed. Sarah nodded, trying to absorb the wisdom. Tell me more about him. About who he was when he wasn't being my dad. Elena looked up from her reports, suddenly interested. Sarah realized that these people knew a version of her father she'd never seen. Victor shifted in his seat. James was the best spotter I ever worked with back when I was still active. Patient, calm under pressure, never took unnecessary risks. But more than that, he cared about getting everyone home alive. I remember a mission in Kosovo, Elena added. Intelligence had failed us, sent us into what should have been an empty building. Turned out to be full of hostiles. James held them off for 4 hours while we called for extraction. Never missed a shot, never panicked. He saved my life in Baghdad, Marcus said quietly. I was young, stupid, thought I was invincible. Walked into an ambush that should have killed me. James crawled 300 meters under fire to pull me out, took shrapnel in his shoulder doing it. Sarah felt tears threatening and forced them back. He never told me any of this. He wouldn't, Dmitri said. James never talked about the violence, only the reasons for it. He said war stories were for soldiers, but hope stories were for daughters. The plane began its descent toward a small airfield in Romania. Through the window, Sarah could see the Carpathian Mountains rising in the distance, snow-capped and forbidding. Somewhere in those peaks, her father was waiting. Final equipment check, Victor announced as they prepared to land. Sarah opened her rifle case and began the familiar ritual of inspection. Every component was perfect, maintained with the obsessive care her father had taught her. The scope was zeroed, the barrel clean, the action smooth as silk. She had 200 rounds of match-grade ammunition, each cartridge hand-selected for consistency. Elena distributed communication equipment, medical supplies, and emergency gear. Remember, once we cross the border, we're on our own. No backup, no extraction team, no government support. If this goes wrong, we disappear and no one ever knows we were there. They landed at a small civilian airport where a man in coveralls met them without speaking. He loaded their gear into a battered truck and drove them through winding mountain roads as the sun began to set. Sarah watched the landscape grow more rugged and isolated with each mile. Their destination was a hunting cabin, tucked into a valley about 20 kilometers from the Shadow Collective base. The building was small, primitive, heated by a wood stove and lit by kerosene lanterns. But it had everything they needed: clear sight lines, concealed approaches, and complete isolation. Victor immediately began setting up a command center, while Elena established communication with her intelligence contacts. Marcus assembled his electronic surveillance equipment, and Dmitri inventoried their supplies. Sarah found herself drawn to the cabin's single window, staring out at the mountain where her father was being held prisoner. The distance seemed impossible, the terrain hostile and unforgiving. Second thoughts? Victor asked, joining her at the window. More like 100 thoughts, Sarah admitted. I keep thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. Good. Overconfidence kills more soldiers than enemy bullets. Victor pointed toward the distant peak. Your father's up there, probably looking out a window right now, wondering if anyone is coming for him. The answer is yes. His daughter is coming and she's bringing everything he ever taught her. Elena approached with a tablet showing satellite imagery. We have a problem. Guard rotations have changed since our last intelligence update. There are now sentries posted on the ridge where you were supposed to position yourself. Sarah studied the images. What about that outcropping to the east? It's further away, maybe 900 meters, but it has cover. Marcus shook his head. 900 meters in these conditions? That's an extremely difficult shot, even for an expert. My father made a 1,200-meter shot in a sandstorm, Sarah said quietly. Maybe it's genetic. Victor examined the alternate position carefully. It could work, but you'd be shooting uphill in variable wind at targets who might be moving. And you'd only get one chance. Miss, and they'll know exactly where you are. Then I won't miss. That night, Sarah lay on a narrow cot, listening to the wind howl through the mountains and the quiet conversations of her teammates as they refined their plans. She thought about her father, wondered if he was cold, if he was hurt, if he even knew help was coming. She remembered being 8 years old, crying because she'd missed an easy shot at the shooting range. Her father had knelt beside her, his big hands gentle on her shoulders. Crying won't fix the miss, little one, he'd said, but learning from it will prevent the next one. I wanted to make you proud. You already do. Every day, just by being brave enough to try. Now, years later, facing the biggest shot of her life, Sarah held on to those words. She wasn't just trying to save her father anymore. She was trying to become the person he'd always believed she could be. Tomorrow, they would begin the final approach to the base. Tomorrow, she would find out if love and training were enough to overcome impossible odds. But tonight, she cleaned her rifle one more time and whispered the same prayer her father had taught her as a child. Guide my hand, steady my heart, and help me protect the people I love. The wind answered with a sound like a distant voice, calling her toward the mountains and whatever waited there. Dawn broke cold and gray over the Carpathian Mountains, mist clinging to the valleys like ghostly fingers. Sarah woke to the sound of Victor preparing coffee over the wood stove, the familiar routine somehow comforting in the face of what lay ahead. Weather report, Elena announced, studying her tablet. Winds variable 15 to 25 kilometers per hour. Temperature dropping throughout the day. Snow possible after sunset. Sarah looked out the window at the mountain where her father was imprisoned. In daylight, the distance seemed even more daunting. How long to reach the shooting position? 6 hours minimum, Victor replied, handing her a cup of black coffee. The terrain is rough and we'll need to avoid the patrol routes Elena identified. Dmitri spread a topographical map across the wooden table. 3 checkpoints between here and the base, all lightly guarded, but we can't go around without adding hours to the journey. Marcus pointed to his communication equipment. I've been monitoring their radio chatter. They're definitely preparing to move prisoners today. We're cutting this very close. Sarah felt her chest tighten with anxiety. Every minute of delay could mean losing her father forever. What's our timeline? Insertion team moves out in 2 hours, Elena said. You and Victor leave at noon to reach the shooting position by sunset. That gives us optimal lighting for the approach while maintaining visibility for your shots. And if something goes wrong, then we adapt, Victor said simply. Your father taught me that no plan survives first contact with the enemy. The key is to stay flexible and trust your training. Sarah spent the morning running through final preparations. She zeroed her rifle scope using a target Victor had set up at precisely the same elevation and distance as her intended position. She practiced breathing exercises to control her heart rate under stress. She memorized the layout of the base from every available photograph. Most importantly, she wrote a letter to her father, just in case she didn't make it back. Dad, by the time you read this, either I'll have succeeded in bringing you home or I'll have failed and maybe died trying. Either way, I want you to know that everything I am is because of what you taught me. You showed me that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting in spite of it. You taught me that every shot tells a story, and today my story is about love, family, and never leaving someone behind. If I don't make it, know that I died proud to be your daughter. If I do make it, I hope I finally become the person you always believed I could be. Love always, Sarah. She sealed the letter in an envelope and gave it to Marcus. If things go badly, make sure he gets this. Marcus nodded solemnly. You'll give it to him yourself. At noon, Sarah and Victor began their journey toward the base. They moved slowly through dense forest, following deer trails and stream beds to avoid detection. Victor led the way with the sure-footed grace of someone who had spent decades moving through hostile territory. Their forest was eerily quiet except for the crunch of snow under their boots and the distant sound of wind through the trees. Sarah carried her father's rifle in a camouflaged case, along with ammunition, emergency supplies, and communication gear. Tell me about the first time you killed someone, she said during a rest stop. Surprising herself with the question, Victor was quiet for a long moment. Croatia, 1995. I was young, maybe your age. Sniper team was targeting our convoy, had already killed 2 of my friends. I had a clear shot at him, maybe 300 meters. What did it feel like? Necessary. And terrible. And necessary again. Victor looked at her seriously. Sarah, in a few hours you may have to take lives to save your father. I won't lie to you, it changes you. But sometimes change is the price of doing what's right. They continued climbing as the afternoon wore on. The terrain grew more challenging, forcing them to navigate around steep cliffs and frozen streams. Sarah's legs burned from the effort and her breath came in visible puffs in the thin mountain air. As they neared the final approach to the shooting position, Victor held up a hand for silence. Through the trees ahead they could see movement. A patrol of 2 guards heavily armed walking a circuit around the ridge. Change of plans, Victor whispered. We'll have to eliminate them quietly. Sarah's mouth went dry. This would be her first real test, and it wasn't even the main mission yet. Victor drew a combat knife, his movements silent and professional. Can you take the one on the right without your rifle? He asked. Sarah nodded, though her hands were shaking. Elena had trained her in close-quarters combat. But this was different. This was real. They moved through the trees like shadows, timing their approach to coincide with the guards' patrol route. Victor positioned himself behind a large pine tree, while Sarah crept toward a cluster of boulders. The guards were talking quietly in a language she didn't recognize, their attention focused on the valley below, rather than the forest around them. Amateur mistake, Sarah thought, remembering her father's lessons about situational awareness. Victor struck first, his knife finding its target with deadly precision. The guard dropped silently to the snow. Sarah's target began to turn, alerted by some instinct, and she knew she had seconds to act. She launched herself from behind the rocks, using momentum and surprise to drive her own knife toward the guard's throat. The man was bigger and stronger, but Sarah had trained for this scenario. She used his size against him, redirecting his defensive movements and finding the opening Elena had taught her to create. When it was over, both guards lay still in the snow. Sarah knelt beside her target, hands shaking as the reality of what she'd done hit her. First kill is always the hardest, Victor said gently. You did well. Clean, quick, merciful. It doesn't feel merciful. It wasn't supposed to. The day killing feels easy is the day you stop being human. They dragged the bodies into the forest and covered them with snow and branches. By the time anyone found them, the mission would be over one way or another. The final ascent to the shooting position took another hour. Sarah's legs screamed with fatigue and the altitude made every breath a struggle, but when they finally reached the rocky outcropping Victor had identified, she understood why her father had chosen this life. The view was breathtaking and terrible. The Shadow Collective base spread below them like a concrete cancer on the pristine mountain landscape. Guard towers, razor-wire armored vehicles, and somewhere inside her father waited. Victor helped her set up the rifle, using natural camouflage to create a hide that would be nearly invisible from below. Sarah settled into the shooting position, adjusting the scope and studying the target area. Range to the main gate 870 meters, Victor reported, using a laser rangefinder. Wind is steady from the northwest at 18 kilometers per hour. Temperature dropping. Sarah made mental calculations, adjusting for all the variables her father had taught her to consider. Through her scope, she could see guards moving around the compound, following predictable patterns. Radio check. Elena's voice crackled through her earpiece. Sniper team, report status. Sniper team in position, Sarah replied. I have eyes on target. Copy that. Insertion team beginning final approach. Stand by for targets of opportunity. Sarah settled in to wait, her finger resting lightly on the trigger guard, her breathing steady and controlled. Somewhere below, Elena, Marcus, and Dmitri were risking everything to reach her father. Her job was to keep them alive long enough to succeed. Through her scope, she watched the base and whispered the words her father had taught her years ago. Patience, precision, purpose. The real test was about to begin. The sun was setting behind the western peaks when Elena's voice crackled through Sarah's earpiece. Sniper Overwatch, we have visual on the compound. Beginning infiltration in 60 seconds. Sarah adjusted her position slightly, feeling the rocky ground beneath her elbows. Through her scope, she could see the insertion team moving like shadows along the tree line below. They were tiny figures at this distance, but she could track their progress by the subtle movements in the vegetation. Wind speed increasing, Victor whispered beside her. gusting to 30 kilometers per hour now. You'll need to adjust. Sarah made the calculations automatically, a skill drilled into her through weeks of intensive training. The crosswind would push her bullets significantly at this range. She dialed the adjustment into her scope and settled back into her shooting position. Movement at Guard Tower 2, she reported into her radio. Single sentry routine patrol. Copy that. We see him, Elena responded. Wait for my signal. Through her scope, Sarah watched the guard in the tower. He was young, maybe her own age, smoking a cigarette as he gazed out over the valley. For a moment, she hesitated. This wasn't a target at a training range. This was a person with a life, maybe a family, waiting for him to come home. Then she thought about her father, locked somewhere in the concrete structure below, and her resolve hardened. Every choice had consequences. Today, the consequence of being in that tower was death. Sniper overwatch, we need that tower guard eliminated now. Elena's voice was urgent. We're blown. They know we're here. Sarah saw muzzle flashes erupting from multiple positions around the compound. The insertion team had been discovered, and now they were in a firefight with superior numbers. Target acquired, Sarah said, settling her crosshairs on the guard's center mass. She controlled her breathing, let her heart rate slow, and gently squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, and through the scope she saw the guard drop. Her first long-range kill, and she felt nothing but grim satisfaction. Guard Tower 2 neutralized, she reported. Outstanding. We're moving to the north entrance. Cover us. Sarah scanned the compound looking for threats to her team. Guards were running everywhere, some taking defensive positions, others searching for the source of the sniper fire. She had the advantage of surprise, but it wouldn't last long. A group of 3 guards emerged from a barracks building, heading toward the insertion team's position. Sarah adjusted her aim and fired rapidly, working the bolt between shots. 3 shots, 3 hits. The guards went down before they could raise an alarm. Multiple targets neutralized near the north entrance, she reported. We're at the door. Elena's voice was strained, encountering heavy resistance. Can you see the courtyard? Sarah shifted her aim to the central area of the compound. Through her scope, she could see guards taking positions behind concrete barriers, setting up to ambush the insertion team when they emerged with her father. I count 8 hostiles in the courtyard, dug in behind cover. This is going to be difficult. Make it happen, Sarah. Your father's life depends on it. Sarah felt the weight of those words. 8 targets, all in defensive positions, all aware that a sniper was out there somewhere. This would require every skill Victor had taught her, every instinct she'd inherited from her father. She started with the targets she could see clearly, the ones who hadn't found good cover. The first guard was crouched behind a low wall that concealed his body but left his head exposed. Sarah's bullet found him instantly. The second target realized his position was compromised and tried to move to better cover. Sarah led him perfectly, her shot catching him mid-sprint. He tumbled to the ground and didn't get up. 2 down in the courtyard, she reported, working her rifle's bolt smoothly. The remaining guards had learned from their comrades' mistakes. They pressed themselves deeper into cover, making themselves difficult targets. Sarah would have to be patient, wait for them to make mistakes or expose themselves. We're inside the building, Marcus's voice came through the radio. Multiple corridors, checking cell blocks now. An explosion echoed across the valley as someone inside the compound triggered a grenade. Sarah saw smoke pouring from one of the buildings and hoped it wasn't where her father was being held. Contact, contact. Elena's voice was sharp with urgency. Heavy resistance on the 2nd floor. We need immediate support. Sarah scanned the building where the insertion team was operating, looking for targets. Through a 2nd-story window, she could see muzzle flashes as guards fired down the corridor where her teammates were advancing. The angle was difficult, shooting through glass into a narrow hallway, but Sarah had no choice. She adjusted her aim point to account for the glass deflection and fired. The window exploded and the muzzle flashes stopped. 2nd-floor threat neutralized, she reported. Good shooting. We found him. We found your father. Sarah's heart leaped. Is he alive? Is he okay? He's alive but weak. They've had him for months. Elena's voice carried relief mixed with concern. We're moving to extract now. Clear us a path to the north gate. Sarah shifted her attention back to the courtyard. The remaining guards had repositioned themselves to cover the extraction route, and more reinforcements were arriving from other parts of the compound. She counted at least 12 hostiles now, all focused on preventing the rescue team from escaping. I count 12 targets between you and the exit, Sarah reported. Some are in hard cover. This is going to be challenging. We don't have a choice, Elena replied. We're coming out in 30 seconds whether you clear them or not. Sarah felt the familiar calm descend over her, the same focus she'd experienced during training but magnified tenfold. This was the moment her father had prepared her for without knowing it. Every lesson, every story, every quiet conversation about patience and precision had led to this. She started with the targets that posed the greatest threat to the extraction. A guard with a rocket launcher was setting up behind a concrete barrier, preparing to fire at the building where her father was being held. Sarah's shot took him down before he could acquire his target. A machine gunner was traversing his weapon toward the north entrance. Sarah put a bullet through his scope, and he fell backward off his mount. The remaining guards began to panic as their numbers dwindled. Some broke cover to retreat to more defensible positions, giving Sarah the opportunities she needed. She worked her rifle like a precision instrument, each shot carefully placed, each target methodically eliminated. "Courtyard is clear," she reported as the last guard fell. "You have a clear path to the north gate." "Moving now," Elena said. Through her scope, Sarah watched 3 figures emerge from the building, supporting a 4th between them. Even at this distance, she could recognize her father's distinctive silhouette. He was alive, conscious, and moving under his own power, but their relief was short-lived. Vehicle engines roared to life from the motor pool area, and Sarah could see armed trucks moving to intercept the extraction team. "Vehicles incoming from your 6 o'clock, she warned. 2 trucks, multiple hostiles. The lead truck was racing across the compound, trying to cut off the escape route. Sarah led it like a moving target, aiming for the driver's compartment. Her bullet starred the windshield, and the truck veered off course, crashing into a concrete barrier. The second truck slowed, its occupants now aware of the sniper threat. Guards dismounted and took cover, making themselves difficult targets. But they had made one critical mistake. They were focused on finding Sarah's position instead of stopping the extraction. Elena and her team reached the perimeter fence and began cutting through the wire. Sarah kept the remaining guards pinned down with precisely placed shots, not necessarily killing them, but keeping them from interfering. "We're through the fence," Elena reported. Moving to the rally point, Sarah watched through her scope as her father and his rescuers disappeared into the tree line. Only then did she allow herself to feel the magnitude of what they'd accomplished. "Package secured," Elena's voice was filled with triumph. "James Martinez is free." Sarah felt tears streaming down her cheeks as Victor squeezed her shoulder. "Outstanding shooting," he said quietly. "Your father would be proud." But their celebration was premature. Searchlights suddenly blazed to life across the compound, sweeping the mountainside. Someone had finally figured out the approximate direction of the sniper fire. "They're looking for us," Victor observed calmly. "Time to go." Sarah quickly broke down her rifle and packed it away. As they prepared to leave their position, she took one last look through her binoculars at the compound below. Guards were still running around in confusion, but the immediate threat was over. Her father was free. The mission was a success. Now they just had to get home alive. Sarah and Victor moved through the mountain forest like ghosts, following a different route back to avoid the search parties that were now combing the area. Behind them, the Shadow Collective base blazed with searchlights and echoed with the sounds of vehicles racing through the night. They had kicked a hornet's nest, and the hornets were angry. "Radio silence until we reach the rally point," Victor whispered as they navigated around a steep ravine. "They'll be monitoring all frequencies now." Sarah nodded, focusing on placing her feet carefully in the darkness. The adrenaline from the firefight was wearing off, replaced by exhaustion and the beginnings of reaction to what she'd done. She had killed at least 8 people tonight, maybe more. Each shot had been necessary, justified, but that didn't make the weight any lighter. They had been moving for 2 hours when Victor suddenly froze, holding up a closed fist. Sarah stopped immediately, listening. Through the forest, she could hear voices speaking in hushed tones, the sound of equipment being moved carefully. A search party, maybe half a dozen men, was working their way up the mountainside. They were still several hundred meters away, but moving in Sarah and Victor's direction. Victor pointed to a cluster of large boulders to their right, and they moved silently toward concealment. From behind the rocks, they could see flashlight beams dancing through the trees below. "They're good," Victor breathed into Sarah's ear. "Professional trackers, not just base security." The search party was following their trail with methodical precision, examining broken branches and disturbed snow. These weren't amateurs who would give up when the going got tough. Sarah checked her rifle, confirming a round was chambered. If they were discovered, she would have to fight again. The thought didn't frighten her as much as it should have. For 20 minutes, they waited in the cold darkness while the search party worked closer. Sarah could hear individual voices now, could see the shapes of men moving between the trees. One more ridge and they would be discovered. Then, miraculously, the search party stopped. Someone was talking rapidly into a radio, and Sarah caught fragments of urgent conversation in a language she didn't understand. After a few minutes, the flashlight beams turned away and began moving back down the mountain. "They're being recalled," Victor whispered. "Something more urgent than finding us." They waited another hour to be sure, then continued their journey. The rally point was an abandoned logging camp in a valley 5 kilometers from the base. As they approached, Sarah could see the warm glow of a campfire through the trees. Elena met them at the perimeter, her face streaked with dirt and exhaustion, but smiling broadly. "Outstanding work," she said, embracing Sarah briefly. "You saved all our lives tonight." "Where is he?" Sarah asked, not caring about praise or congratulations. Elena pointed toward the largest cabin. "Inside, resting. Marcus is checking him over, but he seems to be in surprisingly good shape for someone who's been a prisoner for months." Sarah ran toward the cabin, her heart pounding. She burst through the door and stopped short at what she saw. Her father was sitting by the fire, wrapped in a blanket, looking thinner and older than she remembered, but unmistakably alive. He looked up as she entered, and his weathered face broke into the smile she had missed so desperately. "Hello, little one," James Martinez said softly. Sarah threw herself into his arms, not caring that she was 24 years old and a trained killer. Right now, she was just a daughter who had gotten her father back. "I can't believe you're here," he whispered, holding her tight. "When I heard that sniper fire, I thought for sure it was some kind of rescue operation. But I never imagined. Victor told me you were in trouble. I couldn't just leave you there." James held her at arm's length, studying her face. "You've changed. I can see it in your eyes. You've seen combat." Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "Elena told me what you did tonight. 8 confirmed kills at ranges most snipers couldn't manage. That was you up there on the ridge?" "Victor trained me. And you trained me before that. Everything I know you taught me." James smiled sadly. "I taught you to shoot targets, not people." "I'm sorry you had to learn the difference." "I'm not sorry," Sarah said firmly. "I'd do it again in a heartbeat if it meant bringing you home." They spent the next hour catching up while the rest of the team made preparations for extraction. James told her about his capture, about the months of interrogation and psychological pressure. The Shadow Collective had been trying to extract information about classified operations, but he had given them nothing useful. "They were getting frustrated," he said. "I think they were planning to dispose of me soon." "Your timing was perfect." Sarah told him about the training, about learning to be a sniper under combat conditions, about the fear and determination that had driven her across an ocean to find him. "I read your letter," James said, pulling the envelope from his pocket. "Marcus gave it to me during the extraction. I didn't know if we'd make it out, but you came anyway. That takes a special kind of courage, Sarah. I'm proud of you." As dawn broke over the mountains, Dmitri returned from scouting with good news. "The helicopter will be here in 30 minutes. Weather is clear, and there's no sign of pursuit." The extraction went smoothly. Sarah found herself in another military aircraft, this time heading west toward safety instead of east toward danger. But something had changed in her during the mission. She wasn't the same person who had left Denver a month ago. "What happens now?" she asked Victor as they flew over the Romanian countryside. "Now you go home and try to return to your normal life," he replied. "Though I suspect normal may feel different after what you've experienced." Sarah looked at her father, who was sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. She thought about her apartment in Denver, her job as a communications specialist, the quiet routine she had built for herself. What if normal isn't enough anymore? Victor smiled knowingly. "Then you'll have some decisions to make. But not today. Today you've earned the right to rest." As the aircraft carried them toward safety, Sarah cleaned her rifle one last time, thinking about the shots she'd taken and the lives she'd saved. Every shot told a story her father had taught her. Tonight her story was about love, family, and the length someone would go to protect the people they cared about. But she had a feeling her story was just beginning. 3 weeks later, Sarah sat in her apartment in Denver, staring out the window at a city that looked exactly the same but felt completely different. Her father was in the bedroom down the hall, officially on medical leave while he recovered from his ordeal. The government had accepted their cover story about a hiking accident in the mountains. No questions asked. On the surface, everything had returned to normal. Sarah had gone back to her job as a communications specialist, resumed her routine, tried to slip back into the life she'd left behind. But normal felt like a costume that no longer fit properly. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. She wasn't expecting anyone, and visitors had been rare since their return. Through the peephole, she saw a familiar figure. "Elena," Sarah said, opening the door. "What are you doing here?" The intelligence specialist looked different in civilian clothes, less dangerous but somehow more real. "I was in the area. Thought I'd check on you and your father." They sat in Sarah's living room, drinking coffee and making small talk until Elena finally got to the real reason for her visit. "You're not adjusting well, are you?" Elena asked directly. Sarah was surprised by the question's accuracy. "What makes you say that?" "Because I've been there. Coming back from operations like that, trying to pretend you're the same person you were before." Elena studied Sarah's face. "How are you sleeping?" "Not well. I keep thinking about the compound, running through the shots in my mind, wondering if I could have done better, saved more lives." Survivor's guilt mixed with combat stress, perfectly normal reactions to an abnormal situation. Elena leaned forward. "Sarah, what you did up there was extraordinary. But more than that, you proved something important." "What?" "That you have a gift for this work. Not just the shooting. Though your marksmanship is exceptional, you have the mindset, the calm under pressure, the ability to make impossible decisions when lives are at stake." Sarah felt a chill of recognition. "Are you offering me a job?" "Not a job exactly. More like a calling." Elena pulled out a business card with only a phone number on it. "There are situations that governments can't handle officially. Operations that require people with very specific skills and flexible morals. People like you." Sarah stared at the card. "You mean mercenary work?" "I mean helping people who can't help themselves. Like your father." Before Sarah could respond, James appeared in the doorway. He looked healthier than he had 3 weeks ago, though still too thin. His eyes immediately focused on the business card in Sarah's hand. "Elena Volkov," he said with recognition. "I heard you were out of the game." "Officially, yes. Practically, there's always another mission." Elena stood to shake his hand. "How are you feeling, James?" "Better every day, though I understand I owe my life to more people than just my daughter. She was the key element. Without her overwatch, we never would have made it out." James looked at Sarah with a mixture of pride and concern. "Sarah told me about your offer. Dad, I haven't made any decisions, but you're considering it," he said gently. "I can see it in your eyes. The same restlessness I felt when I was young." Elena excused herself, leaving father and daughter alone to talk. They sat in silence for a long moment before James spoke. "Tell me what you're thinking." Sarah struggled to put her feelings into words. "When I was up on that ridge taking those shots, I felt more alive than I ever have. More focused, more purposeful. Like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was born to do. And now I sit in meetings about communication protocols and file reports about equipment maintenance. It feels meaningless." Sarah looked at her father seriously. "Did you feel this way when you came back from your first real mission?" James nodded slowly. "Like I'd seen behind the curtain of the world. Like I knew things that other people didn't, had responsibilities they couldn't understand." He paused. "It's a dangerous path, Sarah. What Elena is offering isn't a career, it's a way of life. And it changes you in ways you can't predict. More than I've already changed? Much more. Every mission takes something from you, even the successful ones. After a while, you start to wonder if you're still the person you used to be, or if you've become something else entirely." Sarah considered this. "Do you regret it? The life you chose?" "No," James answered without hesitation. "But I made my choices as a young man with nothing to lose. You have a life here, people who care about you, possibilities I never had. What if this is my possibility? What if this is what I'm meant to do?" James was quiet for a long time, studying his daughter's face. Finally, he reached over and took her hand. "When you were 8 years old, I taught you to shoot because I thought it would give you confidence. teach you discipline and patience. I never imagined you'd use those skills the way you did 3 weeks ago. Are you proud of what I did? I'm proud of why you did it. You risked everything to save someone you love. That's not the action of a killer, Sarah. That's the action of a protector. Sarah felt tears threatening. I don't know what I want anymore, Dad. Everything feels different now. Then take time to figure it out. Elena's offer will still be there in a month or 6 months or a year. But once you step onto that path, it becomes very difficult to step off. That evening, Sarah called Victor. He wasn't surprised to hear from her. The restlessness is normal, he told her. You've tasted something most people never experience. The clarity that comes from life and death decisions, the satisfaction of using your skills to protect others. Elena made me an offer. I know. She asked me about you first. Victor paused. What did I tell her? That you have the skills but might not have the stomach for what this life requires long term. That you're motivated by love, not money or ideology. And what do you think? I think, Victor said carefully, that you're the best natural sniper I've ever trained. I also think you're a good person who deserves a chance at a normal life. But I also know that some people are called to this work. And if you are one of them, fighting it will only make you miserable. Sarah spent the next week thinking about Victor's words, about Elena's offer, about the choice that lay before her. She went to work, did her job, came home to take care of her father. But every night she cleaned her rifle and remembered the feeling of making shots that mattered. Finally, she made her decision. She called Elena's number and left a simple message. I'm interested in hearing more about what you do. When can we talk? 2 days later, Elena called back with an address and a time. There's someone I'd like you to meet. Someone who might have use for your particular skills. As Sarah prepared to leave for the meeting, her father found her checking her sidearm. You've decided, he said. It wasn't a question. I think so. This is who I am now, Dad. I can't go back to being who I was before. James nodded sadly but with understanding. Then promise me something. What? Promise me you'll remember why you started this. Not for the money or the excitement, but to protect people who can't protect themselves. Hold on to that reason, Sarah. It's the only thing that will keep you human in this work. Sarah hugged her father tightly. I promise. As she drove across town to meet Elena, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. 3 months ago, she had been nobody special, living a quiet life and dreaming of something more meaningful. Now she was a combat-proven sniper with skills that could save lives and change the course of events. She didn't know what Elena's contact would offer her, or where this new path would lead. But for the first time since returning home, Sarah felt like she was moving towards something instead of away from it. Every shot tells a story, her father had taught her. Her story was far from over, and she was ready to write the next chapter.